Opening the center immediately, this pawn establishes a territorial claim and prepares for rapid development of bishops and queen. A flexible development, eyeing central control and preparing king safety, offering a wide range of pawn structures and counterplay. Asserting central influence, white immediately contests the d-pawn's freedom and prepares kingside development. Embracing the fianchetto, black prepares to unleash the bishop's influence along the long diagonal, a common strategy against white's central pawn push. Developing a knight here aims to control central squares and prepare for queenside expansion. Embracing the fianchetto, black solidifies their kingside and prepares for queenside expansion. Asserting central dominance, white boldly stakes a claim and prepares to open lines. Solidifying the center, black aims to complete development and challenge white's e4 pawn. Boldly staking claim to the center, this aggressive pawn thrust invites tactical skirmishes and prepares for kingside expansion. Fortifying the king's sanctuary is a prudent step, securing the monarch before the central storm erupts. Solidifying the central pawn structure and preparing for kingside expansion. Challenging the center's pawn structure immediately aims to disrupt white's comfortable development and open lines. Solidifying central control, white erects a pawn chain, restricting black's kingside development and preparing for a queenside expansion. Opening the center with this pawn thrust aims to disrupt white's central pawn chain and create dynamic play. Fortifying the center and preparing for a pawn storm, white solidifies their central presence while eyeing potential queenside expansion. Breaking the central pawn chain instantly releases positional pressure and opens diagonal lines for the king's bishop. Recapturing immediately solidifies the pawn center and prepares for a kingside pawn storm development. Unblocking the bishop and preparing a central pawn push, this maneuver aims to open lines for the rook. Positioning the knight centrally shores up the kingside pawn structure, while preparing a potential knight sortie to f3 or e4. Unlocking the queenside and preparing to challenge white's central space control. Castling shores up the king and connects the rooks, preparing for centralized action. Unlocking the c-file and pressuring white's queenside structure. Reinforcing the e4 pawn and preparing to contest the central files, white aims for a flexible structure. Exchanging the bishop simplifies the structure, allowing black to potentially activate their pieces on the open c-file. Securing the central pawn, this repositioning clears the way for potential piece activity on the queenside and prepares to contest the open file. Introducing a knight to the queenside offers potential for a queenside minority attack, but it sacrifices immediate central influence. Probing the queenside, white aims to disrupt black's bishop pair and potentially create weaknesses. Boldly venturing the knight toward the kingside, this move seeks to exploit potential weaknesses in white's pawn structure while creating tactical possibilities around g2. A tactical retreat, aiming to regroup pieces and prepare for pawn advances on the kingside. This knight's leap to b4 injects immediate tactical pressure on white's queenside pawns, forcing a reassessment of their defensive structure and potentially opening lines for black's counterplay. Tightening the kingside pawn structure now, though it might slightly restrict the knight's diagonal influence. Activating the queen towards the kingside, this maneuver aims to support potential pawn breaks and exploit the somewhat open diagonals. Shifting the king grants more breathing room, potentially preparing a rook lift or reinforcing the kingside should the center collapse. Bolstering the e-file defense with a rook repositioning, this quiet maneuver prepares for potential pawn advances and reinforces the kingside. Challenging the knight's position directly addresses its aggressive infiltration, forcing a reassessment of black's queenside setup. Reclaiming the knight's central presence is key to challenging white's pawn chain's dominance. Unlocking the center pawn thrust opens up the e-file and creates immediate attacking potential against black's uncastled king. Shifting the knight back, black aims to untangle the kingside and potentially prepare for a central breakthrough or queenside expansion. Unleashing the queen to challenge the d-file and potentially open lines. Initiating a pawn storm on the queenside with nc7 seems to misjudge the central tension. Unleashing the knight to a central outpost, aiming to pressure the queenside and disrupt black's pawn structure. A daring thrust, black aims to unravel white's central grip, creating dynamic potential at a positional cost. Unleashing a powerful central strike, white aims to shatter black's cramped position and exploit the exposed king. Unburdening the king from the queen's defense allows for new tactical avenues, but weakens the c-file's influence significantly. Establishing a central outpost for your knight, this move prepares to seize the open e-file and initiate pressure. Seizing the open file with the rook offers a glimmer of counterplay, but watch for doubled pawns if challenged on that file. Repositioning the rook to the central file shores up the kingside defenses and eyes potential breakthroughs. Fortifying the queenside pawn structure while preparing for potential breakthroughs. Liberating the e-file, this exchange initiates a crucial pawn race, potentially isolating black's king. Recapturing the knight opens diagonals and injects dynamic counterplay into black's queenside. Securing the monarch's escape route enhances defensive solidity. Exploiting the open e-file with the queen offers a dynamic counterplay, but carefully consider the resulting positional weaknesses for your king. Trading queens here simplifies matters, opening lines for your rook while relieving the pressure on your king. Reclaiming the knight solidifies black's central presence after the exchange, preparing to mobilize the remaining pieces. Reclaiming the open file for counterplay is paramount after the queen exchange. Re-establishing the knight on the c7 square offers some defensive solidity, but sacrifices tempo and central influence. Repositioning the rook to the open file aims to contest the d-file initiative and potentially support a breakthrough. Relocating the rook to the 7th rank creates a strong central presence and prepares to challenge the d-file. Reclaiming the center, white aims to disrupt black's piece coordination and prepare for active piece play. Swapping rooks simplifies into an endgame where your knight on d5 is a glorious outpost. The rook's forced repatriation unlocks central files, inviting an endgame initiative for white. Exchanging rooks simplifies to an endgame where white's slightly better pawn structure might prove decisive. Simplifying to a knight endgame feels strategically sound, leveraging your piece activity for a favorable pawn structure. A desperate attempt to regroup the bishop, but its purpose in this endgame remains unclear. Shifting the king back provides a crucial escape square against potential discovered attacks. Pawn structure solidification aims to prepare the bishop's redeployment for future exchanges. Prioritizing king safety, white repositions the monarch to a more secure square, preparing for future pawn advances. Shifting the king to f8 is a logical step, seeking a safer haven from the open files and potential discovery threats that have been brewing. Initiating a pawn storm to crack open the kingside, accepting positional risks for aggressive intent. The king bravely ventures to the center, seeking refuge and potential counterplay amidst the pawn storm. Asserting central dominance, this knight repositions to contest crucial squares and pressure black's weakened queenside. Challenging the queenside pawn structure immediately after losing the central file will likely prove problematic for black's position. Opening the file offers a direct route for your rook, aiming to exploit the current structural weaknesses. Breaking open the queenside with this pawn capture creates immediate central pawn tension and opens lines for your rooks. Forcing the king into a cramped position opens lines for an aggressive pawn push. Trading off the bishop frees the king, aiming to utilize its newfound activity in this simplified position. Swinging the knight to this square nets a pawn and solidifies the central position. The king's central positioning now feels precarious as white's remaining pieces coordinate a direct attack. Centralizing the king on the open center offers the best prospects for maneuvering in this pawn-deficient endgame. A desperate attempt to create counterplay, but it weakens the kingside further. Unleashing a pawn storm now, aiming to create weaknesses around black's monarch. Opening the g-file forces white's king to contend with a dangerous attacking channel. Unleashing the pawn chain's forward thrust, white aims to exploit black's cramped king. Opening the e-file allows the king to join the fray, but it also exposes weaknesses around the king. The king ventures out, embracing its new role as an active attacking piece in this simplified structure. A pawn push on the queen side, attempting to create a passed pawn and disrupt white's central control. This pawn push shores up the queen side while preparing to mobilize your king into the fray. Bringing the king forward now is risky, exposing it to potential checks and limiting defensive options. Stepping forward with this pawn creates immediate space for your king to maneuver and potentially support further advances. The king is exposed now. Seeking safety on the king side will be crucial. Pushing the pawn to h6 creates a connected passed pawn, aiming to outmaneuver black's defense by forcing weaknesses. Conceding the pawn push opens up a dangerous kingside advance, a tactical risk for the king's safety. Finally, unleashing the passed pawn creates an unstoppable force, forcing black's king into a precarious defensive posture. Fleeing the escalating pawn storm requires vigilance, as the white king now enjoys immense space on the queen side. Unleashing a knight's fork, this check aims to disrupt black's rook and pawn structure. Sacrificing the rook opens up the king for a final, desperate attack. Probing the king's safety, this knight's advance aims to exploit potential weaknesses around the black monarch. Pushing the passed pawn aggressively, aiming to disrupt white's king position before it can organize defenses. Snapping off the knight exploits the pinned pawn, simplifying into a winning king and pawn endgame. Embracing the open path, this capture ignites a sharp, decisive clash for control of the critical central squares. Opening the b-file with this capture creates an immediate threat against black's isolated pawn and opens new attacking avenues. Conceding the central pawn now opens a dangerous path for the white king and sacrifices valuable space. The knight hops forward, aiming to escort the pawn through its final, precarious advance. Pawn promotion is now imminent, forcing immediate tactical calculation to prevent the opponent's new queen. The pawn's relentless march to the 7th rank is a critical endgame maneuver, directly threatening promotion and forcing immediate black reactions. A queen promotion finally occurs, but white's passed pawn on the h-file poses a deadly threat. Initiating the queen promotion race, white aims to activate their most powerful piece and secure an immediate material advantage, forcing black's response in kind. King's final desperate attempt to evade perpetual check, a move born of necessity. Unleashing a devastating discovered check, black's king faces imminent peril as the queen swings into a decisive attacking square. The king's forced march to the queen side neglects immediate counterplay, potentially allowing the opposing queen to dominate the center. Unleashing a royal chase, the queen initiates a forced sequence, aiming to corral the enemy monarch. Sacrificing the queen is a desperate attempt to salvage a lost position, but the king's exposed status makes victory unlikely. Queens reign supreme, forcing a final pawn push to secure victory before the king can escape. The king's desperate flight to the queen side is a gamble, hoping to escape the pawn storm's crushing embrace. Unleashing a royal fork, this decisive check forces the king into a perpetual chase, securing a draw. The black king, now stranded in the center, must navigate a perilous path towards safety, clearing the way for the queen to deliver a devastating discovered check. King's safety is paramount. The monarch's final retreat to the queenside gambles away precious tempi. Targeting the weak c-pawn opens up the path to victory by solidifying the queen's penetration. The knight's return to the queenside aims to create new attacking chances. Checking the knight's opposition offers a forcing checkmate threat on the monarch. Sacrificing the knight allows the pawn to advance and create winning threats. Unleashing the king to its full potential after a long reign of relative quietude. The queen sacrifices itself to achieve a perpetual check, though the white king seems safe. A desperate attempt to find shelter, but the king's safety is irrevocably compromised. Challenging the king's escape route with a timely check offers a glimmer of counterplay in a losing situation. Clearing the path for the queen's patrol creates an unstoppable mating threat. Unleashing a final queen check, black seeks to disrupt white's regal safety, hoping for an opportune moment to shuffle their monarch from immediate danger. Pawing forward with the queen secures a perpetual check, averting immediate defeat. A desperate attempt to stir up some endgame activity, but the queen's position is precarious. A final gambit to lure the black queen into a perpetual check, securing a draw. Shifting the queen to that final open file now offers a glimmer of counterplay against white's advancing pawn. Unleashing the pawn's final step, its sacrifice promises an overwhelming mating net for the black king. A final check on the royal shelter proves futile against the advancing pawn's promotion threat. Protecting the newly created queenside pawn forces a perpetual check or a concession of the queen. An unexpected king confrontation arises, seeking to escape the impending queen attack and force a favorable exchange or perpetual check. Unleashing a mating net, the queen's omnipresence dictates the final agonizing retreat. Unleashing a checking king is often a tactical gamble to force a draw through repetition, a common strategy when material is scarce and a win seems unlikely. Securing this king is the paramount objective. Any slip here leads to immediate disaster. Unleashing a cascade of checks, black sacrifices the queen to force a perpetual checkmate sequence. The king's flight path is sealed, forcing a decisive encounter for the queen. Sacrificing the king's safety, the queen's maneuver opens a critical diagonal for the rook. Unleashing a final check, white forces the black king into a mating net that's already been carefully woven. The black king finds a momentarily safe harbor from the looming royal hunt, a brief respite before the storm. Unleashing the queen's attack along the open g-file to force the king into perpetual checks.